So I guess we should start.
Yes, doing good.
Are we on mic wise? Yes, we are on. Okay. Well, it's now 5:31 on Thursday, August 24th. So I'll go ahead and call to order this regular meeting of the Deschutes County Planning Commission. Our first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from July 27th, 2023 and August 10th, 2023. Is there a motion regarding the minutes?
I move to approve.
Okay, Commissioner Williams has moved to approve the minutes. Is there a second to the
Second.
motion? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from July 27th and August 10th. Is there any debate on the motion? And also, do we have any commissioners present on Zoom? Okay, cool. So, when you get a chance, if you can switch the screen to where I could see any commissioners participating on Zoom, that would be helpful. Who are the commissioners present on Zoom? Is it Commissioner Altman?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay, cool. I can hear you. So while we're
Okay.
waiting for the screen to switch, do you have any debate on the motion before we vote?
No,
Great. So we'll go ahead and proceed to vote on the motion to approve the minutes from July 27th and August 10th. Commissioner Cyrus, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Altman?
I,
And I'll also vote yes. So it's unanimous. The minutes from July 27th and August 10th have been approved. Now we'll move on to public comment about items not on the agenda. So on our agenda, we have two items that we'll be accepting public comment for, the Transportation System Plan and the Tumalo Community Plan. So we'll get to those in just a moment. But is there anyone who would like to make a comment about anything else that's not either of those two plans? Any other concerns or issues that you think you might want to raise while you're here? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom who'd like to make a comment about anything not on the agenda? If so, raise your Zoom hand. All right, then seeing none, we will just proceed to our action items. So the first action item is our update on the Transportation System Plan 2020 to 2024. We will now turn it over to Peter Russell, Senior Transportation Planner, Tarek Rawlings, and Senior Transportation Planner.
Good evening, everyone. Peter Russell, Senior Transportation Planner. This will be a fairly short presentation. So where we are is we're discussing the Transportation System Plan, where its current status is the Planning Commission at the end of the August 10th hearing. You closed it to the oral record and you closed the written record as of 4 o'clock today, August 24th. And then you also said at August 10th, we'll have deliberations on October 12th. So in a nutshell, there's no oral testimony tonight on the TSP. And as of it's 5:30, there's no more written testimony. So summary, we've received approximately 40 written comments between the August 10th hearing and 4 o'clock today. The main themes, I'm not going to go like a blow by blow, line by line of every comment we've seen. I do appreciate everybody getting their comments in, but the main topics that came up over these 40 comments, lots on the Black Butte Ranch to Sisters Trail, both in opposition and some in support. A little bit on the Baker Road, the Lava Butte multi-use path, which is something that ODOT is planning and working on. Couple comments in support, comments in opposition. Related to that is the trails and multi-use paths throughout the rest of the county. We'd received testimony at the 10th hearing on calling for a blanket prohibition. So we got lots of comments on that, both some supportive, some completely against it and not wanting to have that prohibition. They're all on the record that I'll get to you in a minute. And then we also had a request by Commissioner Cyrus to submit all the written comments from the mule deer, winter deer text amendment that we were going to do. And we did a search that had contained the words trail or trails and then put that in the record. So that's in there as well. So this is the project website that has the full record that the Planning Commission can look at between now and October 12th as part of your deliberations. All the comments, we've uploaded everything we've received as of 4 o'clock today that dealt with the Transportation System Plan. So we've received comments from everything from general citizenry to Oregon Department of Transportation to Shoots Trail Coalition. It's been a wide range of comments that we've received from folks. And so here's your next step. So the question I had for you, do you have any directions for staff for preparation that we can help you with on the October 12th deliberations? Typically, in the past, when we've had legislative amendments or even some quasi judicial that you all don't handle, we'll put up a matrix of, topics and what we may have heard, summaries. So again, staff's looking, if you want something from us to have prepared in advance of the October 12th hearing, obviously would get it to you, our usual week in advance. What'll happen is that the planning commission will eventually, after your deliberations, make a recommendation to the board. The board will then hold work sessions on the transportation system plan, and then the board will make a decision on what to do with transportation. For the planning commission, you can have the whole range of options. You can say, recommend approve the TSP as presented. You can say, approve it, but make these changes, and then give us changes that you want to recommend to the board, or you can say, no, we don't like it all, deny the whole thing. So it's the whole range of options that's available to the planning commission. And that's all I've got. Like I said, it's going to be a short presentation. So mainly what we were here for is if you just had any questions about either the summary or what you want from staff in preparation for the deliberations. Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, yeah, for the record, Tarek Rawlings, Senior Transportation Planner, most of the direction aside from the matrix, maybe like how that format might be preferred by the PC. We also asked for time limitations on the testimony that might, or excuse me, that's for a public hearing, but we might just, if you have issues that like might want to be on that matrix, that's typically something we might want to have a little bit of direction on in terms of like big topics or something that you were concerned with. But just kind of echoing what Peter's saying.
So it can range from the large themes that I summarize, it's just that, to various policies. I realize it's kind of a long document, go through the transportation system plan, but it's up to you what you would like staff to help you with to have a successful deliberation.
Commissioner Williams.
I'll start with the first question. One of the comments I read, and I really only read through that which had been inputted by about 5 o'clock last night, but there was an individual who referenced they had received a letter or an email from the Sisters Trail Alliance, but specifically from a board member stating that the STA was against the Black Butte Trail. Is there a way to, but I didn't see a letter necessarily or an email. So is there any question I can ask about that, like clarification, or has additional information been received from STA stating a specific position on this portion of the TSP?
So the record's closed. No, we have not received anything from the Sisters Trail Alliance as an organization that would back up that claim. I'm not saying they're wrong. We just don't have anything in the record. I know that STA has given a presentation to the Black Butte Ranch community. I wasn't there for it. I haven't seen the minutes for it. So I can't say whether that is that quote is correct or not correct, but there's nothing in the record right now from the Sisters Trail Alliance about the Black Butte Ranch. They certainly have the opportunity. People may have thought, oh God, I wish I said X during the planning commission session. When we get to the public hearings at the board, that's your chance to put something back in. So it's one of those that if the Sisters Trail Alliance has a position, they can certainly enter it in the public record when we get in front of the board and do this whole public hearing all over.
And it didn't occur to me to possibly request any transcript or materials from the 2010 chew about on the Black Butte Trail. From what I read, it was contemplated in 2010, and there was a lot of contemplation and discussion. Is that something I could easily find on county dial? I mean, not dial, but just county records?
Probably not, because that was a Forest Service proposal. What we can do is we can reach out to Forest Service, the Sisters Ranger District, and say, do you have a record of that or any kind of executive summary? And we weren't involved with that because it's all on Forest Service land. So we had no role to play, but we can certainly see what they have, if they have kept any record or not of that whole discussion, or if they have any environmental document that they had at the end where they had a
Is it too late to enter that into the record?
Yes,
So then we can't really look at it then.
you cannot, but the board could.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that would make sense. So we're not looking at the Forest Service thing at this point. We're just looking at what we have, but the board could. Yeah, that makes sense. Good question.
Okay.
Yeah. Commissioner Cyrus?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify that any new information wouldn't be admissible for what we're doing.
Okay. So I just have in terms of the matrix, the decision matrix to put together for the planning commission, for our deliberations. I think it would be good to clarify a little bit more about, I'm trying to think, like, I'm not asking for new information in the record, but just in terms of the Black Butte Ranch section of the, the page that has like, hey, here's some routes that might be considered. If we could understand like a little bit more about what that means, because it's unclear to me whether or not it means people are talking about building a trail that actually goes on to Black Butte Ranch property, or if they're talking about building a trail that goes like up to the edge of Black Butte Ranch property, or they're talking about going around the property, or like.
So we don't have that level of detail. There's no alignment. It's just conceptual. Again, if we call out the previous Black Butte Ranch Sisters controversy, the Forest Service, I don't know if they had a proposed alignment then. It was just, general discussion. So we can look and see if there's anything that was discussed that we can reference. It's in the record, but that's going to be the delicate part. We can only issue what's in the record right now to see if there's anything that would help you. But as I recall, there's no precise alignment. It's just a general, from here to here. It's not even on which side of the highway it's going to be.
Right. And you had mentioned that last time that there just isn't that level of detail. It's just kind of a little confusing, I think, for like, we're going to try to weigh in on this plan as best we can, but it's so vague that it's kind of like, sort of like, how do we as a commission make a decision about whether or not to recommend that when we don't really have like hold on a second, like when we don't really have like a clear, like, idea of what they're talking about.
So you can look at the TSP and see what descriptors are in there and where it might be in the bike ped sections, the tables on that. Again, you can do everything from, you could support it conceptually, but need more specifics to say, no, we need a precise alignment. Then we recommend this be pulled until further detail, just from a process standpoint. Again, because on federal land, once they actually get funding for it, whoever they is going to be, whether it's a third party or the Forest Service, then they have to go through an environmental process. And at that point, they would have more specific alignment. Typically, they'll show 3 or 4 alignments, pick a preferred, do an environmental analysis, but that's all stuff that the county doesn't have jurisdiction. We can comment on it, but we'll never as a county have like a land use review where we would look at the trail. It's all going to be under the Forest Service. So we're more just at the 30,000 foot level throughout the process.
That's what I'm confused about, though, is that if it's on Forest Service land, then is that, I mean, the Black Butte Ranch is private property, right? Like in the middle of Forest Service land. So then how can a trail be proposed to be, if it's on Forest Service land, how is it? I mean, the way I'm understanding what's in there right now is that it's being talked about to like build a trail up to this private property line. Because if it's on Forest Service land,
But again,
but I might be misunderstanding.
no, it's always been referred to as the Black Butte Ranch to Sisters. Sometimes it was referred to as just as Black Butte, the actual butte, the physical feature, because at one point the Sister School District wanted to have a trail that went from Sister School District to Black Butte, the butte, not the destination, not the resort. And so that name has always kind of been for both. But again, they don't have a specific endpoint. So I don't know if the Forest Service will say, just go to Black Butte, the butte, and stop there, or if they're talking about going on the other side of the highway, get to the ranch. I don't know if Black Butte owns their land outright, if there's an easement. Again, those are all the kind of details that would come later in the actual building and construction of the trail, but certainly Black Butte's private property, they have the ability to gate and stop that. A lot of the record, if you'll read in there, as I'm sure you have, that was one of the concerns about residents of Black Butte Ranch, of people coming on to Black Butte property and Black Butte paths and whatnot, and either not paying to use them or using their services or having some sort of incident, suing the ranch for liability. So that's probably those who oppose the trail from Black Butte Ranch. That's a lot of their concern, is that we had these private amenities that we wish to keep private and not be tied up into a public trail system.
So are you saying then, and sorry, get to you in a second, just are you saying that at this time, it's what's written in there, it means whatever it means, but then if the Forest Service were to pursue this in the future, they would negotiate those things out with the ranch, like, hey, this is your property, do you want this, do you not want this? Is that how this is like intended to work?
The Forest Service would later on have a design concept where the endpoints went, did it go to the ranch? Does it just fit at the butte? Where does it stop? All that would be during the picking a preferred alternative, and then later on, then they go to right-of-way purchase and deal with all the nitty-gritty construction details farther down the line. At the TSP, or just at the 30,000 foot conceptual level, do we want a multi-use path in the TSP? We have between Black Butte Ranch and Sisters, alignment to be determined, size to be determined, nitty-gritty construction details to be determined all later. Just conceptually, do you want that? And the reason that we do it on the TSP is that if a third party tries to get this constructed, typically they're going it through grant funding. And one of the first things a grant reviewer looks at is this facility on an adopted plan of the local jurisdiction.
Okay.
That helps.
It does help, actually. Thank you. I hope that was helpful to other people too, but that does help me answer questions that I had. Commissioner Cyrus?
Yeah, without getting into deliberations, I guess I had kind of the same question where Planning Commission and Deschutes County doesn't really have any jurisdiction over the Forest Service. I did ask the question for specific details on whatever design and plans there was for all of the trails that are represented. And it appears that pretty much everything is conceptual and mostly on public lands. So I guess I'm back to the same question, as why are we even addressing it? I can't just to answer your
Just
question.
said about they need to have it in order to apply for grant money or whatever it has to be in our.
So it's just the Board of Commissioners rubber stamping it or adopting a proposal that they can go out for grant. But to answer your question with regard to Black Butte, Black Butte has its own extensive trail network, and what they're trying to do is keep the public out of their trails, and they don't want the connection from, at least most of those who have commented, those who live there don't want it because they don't want to open the gate to the public.
It's very clear in the comments. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone who wrote in about that you were very clear, and we appreciate the input and clarity of it.
There are a couple of Black Butte Ranch inhabitants who do like it because there's.
Yeah. I did see those as well. Just if anyone's watching, those were also clearly written, and we also appreciate those. So.
Yes, the preponderance of comments from Black Butte Ranch were again.
Okay. Other questions of clarity?
For the Lava Butte Trail, if we could have listed the A, B, and C alternatives or options, as there were options given to the people at open houses. And I know that someone specifically is like, yeah, this one's okay, but I'm really for option C. And I don't know if that was already going to be in the matrix.
No, the reason we can't do that is that information wasn't in the record. So what the person did is and I understand planning is confusing. You've got all kinds of different things going on. So ODOT was having open houses about different alternative routes to get from Lava Butte down to La Pine. They haven't entered those into our record for the transportation system plan. So, on the record, we can't refer to A, B, or C because there is no A, B, or C in our record. It's just Lava Butte to La Pine. And then ODOT is now going through their own process to try and get the preferred alternative. So we don't have anything that we can reference for A, B, or C. We can just talk about conceptually what's going there. But
So is it possible to make a motion to reopen the written record so information like this can be submitted?
We would have to rescind our previous motion in order to do that.
It would, if I may, Madam Chair, if the Planning Commission wanted to reopen the record, it would require notice again to we'd have to, you would treat it as if it's a entirely new hearing, so there'd be notice to the bulletin, there's the action of closing a hearing has some significance.
Yeah.
One can reopen, but it requires us to comply with our procedures code to communicate, in this case to the through the newspaper, through a public notice of the intent of the planning commission. So it is possible, but there's some procedural steps that are involved.
So is Lava Butte part of the TSP? Is that the trail from Lava Butte to Lapine part of TSP, or is that just something someone commented on?
In the comments that I've seen, but I think it might, I was gonna offer a way to maybe look at this there. So the way that those projects or those proposals are worded in the draft TSP are as connections. They're not routes, they're not trails or designs of any kind. They're just A to B. There's a public desire for connectivity between two areas, and it's acknowledging that as a really high level concept. In part because there's all these other entities running around on the ground that would actually have to handle the public outreach and the design itself and how that even gets implemented. So I think that maybe for the benefit of the commission, it might be helpful to just frame this as that high level. There is Forest Service, there's BLM, there's state lands, it's all within the county, and our plan reflecting public input, agency input is trying to capture some sentiment that there's a desire for connectivity between these given places. There are no design aspects for it. In terms of the alternatives for like that was from a specific agency that's actually, has jurisdiction over much of that property. And so they could already start thinking about conceptual designs and things like that. It's like Peter said, that's not in the record right now, but I think just trying to zoom out, it might be helpful to kind of characterize these things as more like connections and connectivity rather than like a road project or a trail project with design and engineering and different routes and outlines and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, other questions? Commissioner Altman, do you have any questions on this item? Not seeing any more questions, so in that case, we'll move on to our next item, which is our continued public hearing on the Tumalo Community Plan Update 2020 to 2040. Peter Russell, Senior Transportation Planner, and Tarek Rawlings, also Senior Transportation Planner.
Second here, I'll share my screen. All right. Okay, thanks for your patience.
Okay, so this is the continued hearing on the Tumalo Community Plan. Both oral and written testimony can be presented. Because we had all the disclaimers at the August 10th hearing, we don't have to go through the same, do anyone wish to challenge the commissioners? The normal preamble that we have, we've already done that on August 10th, so we don't have to repeat it tonight. So just view it as this is an uninterrupted hearing. Look at it that way. We just went away for a 2-week break and now we're back. Again, it's a hybrid hearing, so if you want to speak, you have to fill out blue sign-in sheets, which are over there on the right by the hallway. You submit that to Planning Commission support staff or Tarek or I. Before you speak, it's helpful if you give us your first and last name and your mailing address. The reason is that way we can add you to the contact list, and so you'll be there for when we have the Planning Commission make their recommendations, and then we can notify when the next board hearing would be. We're observing a 3-minute time limit per party for speaking. For written, we can still take a written testimony. You can submit that again in person, depending on what the Planning Commission does tonight. If they continue the hearing, then you'll send it to Tarek Rawlings, which will send it to the Planning Commission. For remote participants, you can attend using Zoom. Chair Kiris will request that all Zoom participants use your hand to identify that you wish to speak. On a computer or smart device, you press the raise hand button. If you're on a phone, you just do the dial in, which is *9 on your keyboard, and the chair will recognize you. Now for the world's fastest staff report. So again, all the notes and notices and record materials we received as of 4 o'clock today. There's no deadline, but this is just what, we've gotten so far. We'll probably get more tonight. Is at this particular website that we've had up several times. So where we are, the Planning Commission at the August 10th hearing continued the hearing to August 24th. That meant they left it open. It's both open to oral and written. Those are open. Per the Planning Commission and public request, the County Public Information Officer sent out additional notices of this meeting. They sent them out between August 14th and August 17th via requested social media platforms. So they went on Facebook, they went on Instagram, they used Nextdoor. I can't remember if that's all, since I'm on none of these, I can't remember if it's all of them. Was there any other one I missed?
I think those were the main ones.
Those are the main ones. Okay. And then we've received written testimony prior to this hearing, which I can quickly summarize the topics. So we've received so far 8 written comments. Now there may be more, but at the time we looked at this and then left at about 4 o'clock. That's what we had. So the main concerns are some of the public notification for even the August 24th hearing. There was some concern about the public input process throughout the Tumalo community plan and how that was used or not used in terms of specific policies or concerns about the effects of tourism on Tumalo and the recreational use of the Deschutes River. There were concerns about growth in the community, concerns about speeding in Tumalo, again, mainly Climb Falls Road, Tumalo Road, a desire to keep the small town feeling. There was several comments about we don't want a park district. During the open houses, we heard some said, we'll explore it. So we got comments say they do not want a park district. Comments about keeping the solar setbacks that we have in Tumalo. We got comments about the county a few years back put in a temporary public restroom I think it was off Wharton near the swimming hole. And so there are concerns with that turning into a place for drug use, or the same thing at the put in takeout point there at the intersection of Climb Falls and Tumalo on the west side of the bridge. And then we also got a comment from ODOT regarding minor edits and corrections to the transportation policies. Some words were misspelled, and also there was a reference to an urban design manual. It's now part of a highway capacity manual, but nothing substantive. So what do we do next? Well, after I'm done talking, the Planning Commission will open the continued public hearing. At the close of the oral testimony, the Planning Commission has 4 options. You can continue the hearing to a date certain. So just as you did from August 10th to August 24th, you keep both oral and written open to a date certain. You can close the oral and leave the written record open to a date certain. You can close both the oral and written record and set a date for deliberations, or you can close the hearing and begin deliberations tonight. So then ultimately, after your deliberations are concluded, you'll make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. And then what will happen is staff will hold a work session with the Board of County Commissioners, relaying what we heard during the Planning Commission process. Then there'll be a public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners where they will take oral and written testimony as well, and kind of repeat the process and ultimately making a decision what they want to do with the transportation system plan. And so with that, both Tarek and I are open if you have any questions.
Further questions? Clarifying anything? Okay. Susan, Commissioner Altman, any questions? Okay. I have some questions, but I'm going to save them till after we hear from everyone, since we may have more questions after that. Also, likewise, if there's questions from you all that the staff can answer, I should mention, we're not actually taking any questions tonight. We're just here to listen and learn. But if you have questions for the staff, we'll just kind of keep track of them as we go through. And then at the end, I'll just give the staff an opportunity to answer any questions they'd like to respond to. And that way we can kind of keep the hearing moving. So we do have 1 blue sheet so far, but I'd be pretty excited if there were more blue sheets. So we did have also blue sheet about the transportation system plan, but since the hearing is closed, we can't hear about that. But we do want to hear about the Tumalo community plan. So when you get a chance, fill out one of these things and just give it to really any of these guys here, or you can bring it up here if someone's not actually talking. Don't come up when someone's speaking, because that would be distracting for us, but you can give it to one of these guys. Okay, so our first person is Nunzi Gold. And as you go, I'll probably raise my hand right around 3 minutes or so, but just take that as a gently wrap up what you are saying, and we'll go from there.
Thank you all for your service. I'm Nunzi Gould. I live in rural Deschutes County. The Tumalo plan as it's drafted is kind of half-baked. It skips over from being a plan for land outside the unincorporated community and then trying to be a plan for inside the unincorporated community. So I think at best, it needs to be labeled what it's designed to do and that it stick to that. There are a lot of, first off, I wrote comments into the record by 5 o'clock. I was under the assumption that that would be forwarded to the Planning Commission, so you would have a chance to read that before this hearing, and it wouldn't be summarized by staff. 3 minutes is not enough to give details of what is really cattywampus on this plan, but this plan is a development plan to develop our rural community, and that's not what I support. I support protecting and preserving and conserving our rural community. Deschutes County does not have a mandate to develop outside its cities with city type of development, either as a destination or otherwise. So I really encourage you as planners, you are our planners, not the staff. You are the planners to have your vision and to understand where there is not infrastructure and where we should not be putting infrastructure. Because what follows after you put in infrastructure is explosive growth. And that's not what I want to see in my rural community. I also wrote comments by the 5 o'clock deadline to get to you on the transportation system plan, which apparently the record closed at 4, which I was unaware of. And the reason these things are interlinked is because the TSP relates to the Tumalo Community Plan. And just adding the Tumalo Community Plan as an appendix to the TSP is wrong. The TSP needs to be a prospective document. It needs to talk about the things that we currently have in our community in detail, not just maybe some sort of trail between A and B, or a trail between Redmond and Tumalo that might go on the same trail as Bend to Sisters. I don't know how you get there to get from Redmond to Tumalo using a trail from Bend to Sisters. So I really implore you as the commission, as our planning commissioners, to think long and hard about where development should go in the next 20 years, where there is capacity, and that we not put citizens in this ridiculous upheaval that the county development department, and remember, the planning department here runs underneath the development department. That's what they want you to embrace. So both comments for the record that I put in on the TSP, I'd like now entered into the Tumalo plan because it relates to things in your Tumalo plan that you're trying to do, like put a roundabout right next to the river where there's recreational access.
Okay, thank you.
So I hate to be really bitter, but this is not the time to put a half-baked plan together up for the year 2040. We can do better. All of you can do better, and I have trust in you to do that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And you don't sound bitter. I appreciate it. Okay, who's next? All right, we got Jim Dunn up next. Come on up.
Thank you, Jim Dunn, Tumalo Road. I too have some concerns. I put in a note to the staff about the annexation comment, because that seems to be the direction that they're trying to go, is to annex us into Bend. It says annexation to a district, which I assume would be Bend. We can't afford the tax increase that's associated with that. Can't afford the increase in tax associated with the new park district. So our concerns are that we already have a big tax coming up. with our first responders that's been passed. And so we just don't want additional funds associated there. Sewer is tied to this, as Nancy said, it's the foundation for growth. So we keep separating that from this discussion, and I think we got to keep it what it is. Also put in there a definition of a rural small town. We need an architectural review committee. Otherwise, we're going to end up with the type of buildings like Larry Kine put in next to the steakhouse. And does that really represent small town rural feel? Something like Northwest Crossings or Sisters, where they've done it correctly, we need to define architectural review committee. And we're unincorporated and we're not required to grow. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, our next person's going to be Lauren Kramer. And then maybe if anyone else would like to contribute, we're interested. I know I can speak for everyone. We're very interested here. So fill out one of those blue things.
Good evening. So I spoke last meeting about the same subject, but it was under the transportation system plan. And it's regarding the roundabout there at Tumalo and Cook and Klein, Cook and 20. So I'm curious, you had said I could ask maybe staff, is this something that can fall under the Tumalo 2040 plan? I had asked if we could get some funds for this project through the transportation plan, but maybe it's something that would fall under the Tumalo plan. Is that something that?
I think that's a really good question. We'll have them kind of come back to that.
Okay,
at the
and
end. Yeah.
just to let you know, just an update. So with the process that was put in place for this project, we have 4 concepts. They're wonderful. And the community will be voting on that next month. And then that's hopefully we'll be able to get some funds. So I don't know how we can work together, but it would be amazing for the county to help with that. So
Very good. Thank you.
thank you.
Hey, who else wants to provide some input on this plan so we can orient ourselves to what you guys want? No, okay, sorry. No pressure either if people want to just hang out. Do you want to fill out a blue paper? Okay. Okay. And also, no pressure to anyone who doesn't really want to speak. Just because you're here, you're welcome to just listen and hang out and see what we're doing and hear other people speak. But just in case anyone's on the fence, I know everyone's interested to hear what people think.
In total, or can I finish it?
You can totally finish it after this. Yeah, it's just the reason for asking for people's addresses, by the way, is just because the staff are maintaining a mailing list about this issue. And so if you're writing your address down, that helps them know how to get in touch with you with updates with it. So that's why we ask for the addresses and the email addresses. So that is the reason for that. All right.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Would it be out of line to ask if those that speak identify whether they're in or outside the proposed tunnel area that we're actually talking to or talking about?
Great question. I think it's completely fine to ask that. I think people probably can say whatever they would like to say in response, but if you wouldn't, if you'd like to share whether you live in Tumalo or out of Tumalo, you're welcome to. And Commissioner Cyrus is interested. I'm interested.
I mean, I personally would have an interest in especially trying to more nearly address the concerns of those who live in the affected area versus somebody that may live in Lapine or Sisters or somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on it is people can share whatever they would like to. You don't have to share that, but yeah.
We are supposed to give an address, so that should also help.
Yeah, so these are part of the public record, so it's not just me who gets to look at these. If you want to look at these where people have written their address to kind of contextualize, that's also fine.
Yeah, but generally most people have a Bend address, so it's even without actually going through and pulling up every single address.
You'd have to Google stalk everyone. Yeah. So is it a question about our process? Great question. So the question for anyone listening on Zoom is, what are the boundaries of this particular area? And so maybe while you're filling out the form, I know I said I would let staff questions go to the end, but maybe we could just have the staff address that, since it might impact what people decide to share as we go through.
Well-
They have a map.
We got a map of the boundaries of Tumalo. So there's no annexation proposed for Tumalo. Our wording was evidently clunky. The thought was, if there was a park district that want to annex land in Tumalo, it wasn't Bend annexing Tumalo itself. It was just if there was a park district, be it Bend or be it Redmond, because the schools in the Redmond School District, if they wanted to annex part of Tumalo to put a park in there, but nothing about Bend, like expanding an urban growth boundary or city limit to include Tumalo. It was just a park. So we can try and work on the language to make that more specific, so it's not confusing. Sorry about that.
Thank you for clarifying. I think that might, yeah, it's good question and good clarification. Okay, so let's move on. Yeah, if you can.
Hi, I'm Tanya Hanlon, and I live inside the Tumalo district. I live on Tumalo Road, actually. I've been a resident of Central Oregon and Bend since 1975, and I've seen tremendous growth. And at times I've seen disorganized planning put into effect. And I understand transportation is a strong issue. My primary concern is Tumalo is a unique little area. We have an educational avenue going out to Redmond. We have farming. We have tourism. But we're kind of in our own little world, and we have little antennae that go out to different areas. So we're not really bound to one primary commercial district, let's say. The downtown area obviously is trying to grow and sustain itself, and we have a sewer issue. I sympathize. The 50 by 100 lot platted out in Bend and Tumalo from the original Laidlaw and the original Bend plats have always been difficult. And I don't know how one could actually go about changing that, but they have a unique challenge. I don't think it expands outside of that commercial district. I think that challenge needs to be directly addressed as an inside that commercial area. The rest of us, I speak for many of the people I've been participating in many of the community meetings and such, really want to just laissez-faire. We don't want to be brought into a $90,000 sewer system. I was never even able to get a clear clarification on how long my step system would last that I was going to be required to put in, and what the cost line foot to allow me to access the main primary line would cost. So am I looking at $90,000? Am I looking at $130,000? It seemed like a very cost prohibitive solution to the downtown problem. And I know that Mr. Kine had offered to go in through the downtown community years ago and was suggesting when the highway and the bypass, the roundabout was put in, that he was going to try to get access underneath the road and was offering individual lots. I was selling real estate at the time, and I had a transaction and an inquiry, and that was the answer from the listing agent, that there would be a private access voluntarily at a very high cost. It was, I think, over $200,000 to participate at that time. You can get a lot of your septic pumped for $200,000. It's some kind of the way some of us have looked at this whole challenge. The Downtown Association needs to move their sewage. They have existing septic tanks. Maybe they do need to have them replaced, and maybe, yeah. So, thank you for your time, and thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so our next person is going to be Casey Roscoe.
Hi, I'm Casey Roscoe. I live in Tumalo and I'm woefully unprepared for this. I just came to support Lauren, who has been doing this amazing job, trying to really make sure that the community is represented with the roundabout, with beautiful ideas and thoughts and history and everything. But then to kind of hear some of these things, she's like, go say something. So I think it's really important to know that so many of us that live in Tumalo and love Tumalo are there because it is what it is. It's not a city. It's not even a town. We literally live in an irrigation district, and the most of us do something with agriculture. So we're not really looking for septic systems and growth. And I think it's so lovely that it's been mentioned that there's, in the paperwork, at least, that there's cyclists and so forth. Well, I haven't honestly met a local that's super excited about that. So I understand that there's this kind of push for growth and tourism and so forth. And that feels lovely. But I think that so many people that spent their life savings to live there, or that grew up there, or are there on purpose for whatever reason, are there because it is what it is, period. Not because they want it to be something else. And that's actually all I have to say. I hope it does stay small. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now we go to Nathan Wiesmer. Cool. Okay.
Hi, I'm Nathan Wismer. I live on Twin Bridges Road. And I oppose any development of Tumalo, any sewer. I think if anything is going to be done, it should be done slowly. And like Tom said, with an architectural group, because if you push anything too fast, I just don't believe it's going to be good. It should be well thought out. And from what I understand, with my contact at ODOT, there's already sewage pipe put in underneath 20 from Larry Kind, and there's up to 20 permits available, from what I understand. I just want to see it stay the way it is. We've only been here 10 years and it's already exploded in my mind. And I think a lot of people here, I'm gonna echo what they've been saying, is like, I think people move there because of what it is, not because of what it's going to be. And so that's all I got to say. And I had to say something. So thanks.
We appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, other people want to weigh in, say what you think. Yep.
I'm not prepared for this, but I just wanted to say I'm also within Tumalo. I've lived here for almost 20 years, and I just kind of want to echo what other people tonight have said, is we live out in the rural area because we want the rural area. We don't want sewers and development and all these things to come. We like to be in the rural area. That's why we're there. If you keep the written comments open, maybe I'll come up with something a little more formal to send later. But for right now, that's what I have.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Other people. Even if you're not prepared or you don't feel prepared, you're still prepared because you have your life experience of, living in this place. And that's all we really need to make a comment.
I'm Diane Dunn and I live on Tumalo Road. And like Misty said, I agree with everything everyone has said. We're a rural area, we're unincorporated, and we have no desire for growth. And we can't be forced to have growth because we are unincorporated. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Everybody's getting encouraged. Good evening. My name is Mike Skeens. I live on Pinehurst Road, and I've lived in Tumalo for 7 years. My wife and I intentionally looked throughout Deschutes County, chose Tumalo because they had a plan, and the plan had regulated growth. And we chose Tumalo because it was a small rural town and it was unincorporated. And so even in a short period of time we have been there, we see growth happening and things are changing and we don't like it. And we want the charm of a small rural town. I seasonal graze cattle and raise bees and enjoy the agricultural environment of Tumalo, that it wouldn't change. And so I implore you, as you consider moving forward, that you would keep our small town small. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
My name's Dale Pierre. I live at 4th and Wood, where the new underpass is going for the bicycles and pedestrians. And I'm the manager of the local water district. So I would like to encourage the planning commission to please consult with the water district whenever you decide to make any plans on expansions anywhere, because we're just about taxed out on water rights, available water as far as what we can pump and storage. We're just now able to get enough reservoir storage for fire flow. So we got to be careful how much more we expand as far as structures or anything, because otherwise the fire department's going to have to start drafting out of the river. If we can only maintain now fire flow by state requirements of 1,800 gallons a minute for 2 hours. After that, we're in trouble. So I'd like to encourage everybody. I've had some inquiries about some of the larger parcels being developed and want to know if we can furnish some water. I said, well, it's going to be pretty expensive infrastructure because you're going to have to acquire water rights for us because we can't afford to go after more water rights. You're going to have to put in pumping stations and you're going to have to put in transport lines. And so therefore, their growth potential is pretty limited as far as being furnished water. So thank you for that consideration.
Yeah, thanks for that added context. That's helpful.
Can I ask a question, just a
Yep.
clarification?
Yes, please, Commissioner Williams.
Sir? You mentioned something about 18,000 gallons for 2 hours and then you're maxed.
Provide 1,800 gallons a minute to the hydrants for 2 hours at 20 PSI. That's for fire flow. It's 1,500 gallons a minute for 2 hours for residential, but we got the commercial down there that requires 1,800 gallons a minute. So we have to go by the higher standard.
And it seems to tap out after 2 hours.
Right. After that, well, we can keep flowing after that just by what our pumps can put out, but we don't have the reserve.
Okay.
And that's what they're looking for, is the reserve.
Great question.
While they're drawing that off, we can still be putting in 200 gallons a minute into our storage by turning all our pumps on, but that's not going to last very long.
Thank you.
Especially if they have a wildfire.
Mm. Mm. All right. Anyone else? Well, getting some good input, helpful information. Okay. All right then. So we have an opportunity for staff to respond to questions. And we did have one question for you guys. Do you want to go ahead? I also have some questions, but let's see here. Are you trying to remember what the question was?
I answered it, but you stopped. It was.
Oh, there was another question too. I think about the roundabouts and the artwork.
Oh,
yeah.
So, well, first, let me get the big elephant out of the room, in that we're not calling for any growth in Tumalo. We're not changing the zoning in Tumalo with this plan. We're not changing the boundaries of Tumalo in this plan. We're not changing the height limits in Tumalo in this plan. What we're doing is trying to get a plan for the ballpark 824 people who are going to live in Tumalo at the end of this planning's life cycle, which is 2040. So currently our estimate is using Portland State, there's 574 people in Tumalo. In 2040, there'd be 824. There's roughly ballpark 105 vacant parcels. So we're not talking about changing Tumalo's boundaries or the uses allowed in Tumalo or the height limits in Tumalo. What do you do with Tumalo as it's currently zoned and has its limits defined. And we're not changing the type of unincorporated community Tumalo is. It's defined by the state as a rural community. We're not saying rural unincorporated community. We're not proposing to change it to an urban unincorporated community, which is what Lapine was and Sun River is. So for us, the idea is that Tumalo stays as Tumalo, and under the state land use program, we have to accommodate growth and development consistent with the zoning and uses that there are now. So we can't, local governments, it's a high bar for them to do what's called a moratorium. They basically say, okay, you cannot do any more land use approvals because of X, Y, and Z reasons. It rarely happens in Oregon. City of Bend looked at one doing a moratorium in late 90s, early 2000s. What's led to the West Side Consortium when Tethero was trying to develop what was then known as Cascade Highlands. The Bend City Council and the county and ODOT were all looking at that. So you can do a moratorium under the state rules. It is really, really difficult to do. And so Tumalo wouldn't fit a moratorium just based on the reading of the statute. But again, we're not talking about changing Tumalo the way Tumalo is. We're trying to keep Tumalo as much as what people love about it now, consistent with the amount of growth that it's going to be under Portland State's expectations. And again, I'll be the first to tell you, that's a projection. They may hit it by 2040, they may not hit it by 2040, but that's pretty much the system we have to go with.
So, we do have a person on Zoom with their Zoom hand raised. I'm thinking that I was amiss by not actually asking for those comments first, so I apologize. But I think we should actually pause the staff answers until we hear from our Zoom participants who may want to provide input. And then we'll go back to our staff comments again. Okay. Okay, good. I see we've got our Zoom participant, William Kuhn, elevated to panelist, and you are on mute and we don't see you yet.
That's because I'm not going to be visible.
That's okay. We're totally fine with that. No, you don't have to have.
My name is William Kuhn. I do not live directly in the area of question. Politically, I am a member of the Soil and Water Conservation District, representing that part of the county. And I have sat in on a couple of the community meetings that have been regarding this subject. By the way, I'm not speaking for the Soil and Water District. I'm speaking as an individual. In general, these groups that I attended did not want increased density. They did not want increased taxes. They're very happy with the current rural community. I'm not sure they even want the increase that is projected by the state of, by the university. I personally, as a person who has lived in the area for 35 years, would not like to see Tumalo increase in size, increase in density. I'd like to see the rural community remain as it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to provide some comments on this plan? Please raise your Zoom hand. And if you're on the telephone, you're dialing in on the telephone, please press *9. Okay. Okay, great. We're not seeing any, but if if it's just taking you a little longer, please still raise your Zoom hand. And I'm going to give it back to our staff, and starting actually with Commissioner Cyrus has a question for staff, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with understanding your comments about the projected growth. And granted, I know, the cities, et cetera, are required to provide for 20 years worth of growth based on the Portland State projections. Does the rural community have to provide for growth, or is that based on existing zoning, et cetera? That's what could happen under the existing conditions.
Correct. It's what we anticipate given the existing zoning on the land as it is today.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Great. And I also have a follow-up question about what you just said. So you mentioned that there can't be a moratorium on we can't have a moratorium on no new structures, no new land use applications because the bar set by the state is too high. Is there anything else that you guys as staff could do or like in terms of your options of how you write this plan, change this plan, or how we might recommend you change the plan, is there anything else that can be done to limit the growth in Tumalo, or is that pretty much the plan, the way it's written right now, is like the best we can possibly do to limit growth?
So I'll start and then others will, I'm sure, pitch in. So when we have someone apply for land use in Tumalo, as Dale alluded to, we send out notice to the various utility districts and they come back with what are called will serve letters. So is there adequate water to serve this? Is there adequate electricity? Cleveland from our on-site wastewater will weigh in. And so if you don't have enough water or you don't have a successful on-site system, we may not be allowed to permit your land use. There's also some other, there's outright permitted versus conditional. You can propose something as a conditional use, and that has more, to use a planning term, squishy review criteria about being compatible and harmonious. And sometimes what you're proposing doesn't meet those. But in terms of a blanket policy of no growth, I don't think we can do that. I don't know if you want to throw in anything.
Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. What Peter said is quite accurate. I would just acknowledge for the record, again, there's a lot of strong opinions about sewering. A comment that somehow the Community Development Department is spearheading sewer, which is, I need to put on the record that that's not the case. But what the Community Development Department does do, and I think it's been mentioned, we have sanitarians that are responsible for administering the on-site wastewater program. And we have lots out there, some that are quite small, that don't drain very well. But there are some existing septic systems that that over time, septic systems have a lifespan. And if you, the bigger lot or parcel you can have a reserved drain field. You can have, when the septic system or the drain field reaches that life expectancy, larger parcels can establish a new drain field to continue to maximize with potential upgrades how that septic system will function. In Tumalo, like Terrebonne, septic systems, when they reach their life expectancy on small lots, there would be no option, in which case you could have existing residences or potentially businesses where under the state's on-site wastewater rules, you can, there's a scenario out there where it's not a habitable structure anymore. And I believe that's what spearheaded the conversation a year or two ago to start thinking about a sewer feasibility study. So why am I mentioning this? As the community many members have talked about what they value in the vitality of Tumalo today, the way it is, the way you can if there's a strong approach to limit sewer or try to prevent sewer from happening, what that means is it would, might be hard to establish new restaurants, new uses that require some pretty sophisticated septic systems. So you could keep the list, it comes with some consequences. You could keep the businesses that you have there for a period of time, but long-term, there likely will become a reckoning of when this area that has small lots, what it means for those businesses, what it means for some of those residences. So to be kind of status quo supportive, which is totally understandable in the short term, may have real benefits. But I think what Peter and Tariq and others have tried to communicate, and there's been a separate process with the sewer feasibility study that the road department led with a consultant, is to try to talk about these long-term situations, how they could present, what happens if they present themselves, and what could be the implications for the community. Our department is not here to put a hand on the scale and tell the community which way is the right way. But we do have a responsibility, I think, to talk about openly and transparently what we understand today and how it could impact the community tomorrow. Similar to what Peter said to Commissioner Cyrus's question, based on existing zoning, if there is a possibility that more families will move in and you could potentially get more businesses just based on the existing zoning construct. So whether or not that happens, we can't foresee that or foretell that. And similarly, we can't predict when, certain existing septic systems could reach their life expectancy. So just wanted to put that on the record to supplement Peter's remarks.
Okay. I think I get what you're saying, but we'll see what Will has to say first and then we'll sum it all up.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Will Groves, your planning manager. I think there's a confluence between the existing code and the potential for sewer that you're hearing from the public. And, it's a little bit technical. And so I don't know if they've expressed in a way that you could hear. So something that's allowed in the zone right now and, on any lot is a single family dwelling, of course, but also duplexes are allowed as well as multifamily dwelling complexes. So those are, and up without limit, a number of dwelling units that could be put on a property, based, limited only by kind of height restrictions and lot areas. And to date, you haven't seen these either duplexes or multifamily dwelling complexes in Tumalo because of the constraint of sewer availability. You need a very significant amount of land to serve multiple residential units. And so I think that it's important when you ask, is there some way to constrain growth outside of a moratorium? I think that, and I hope I'm not getting too far ahead of the people behind me, but I think that they've got some concerns about what happens under a scenario where sewer comes. And then, you could put, a triplex, 8 apartments, 30 feet tall, all up and down the streets there. If there's sewer to serve it and they can get parking and they can meet the other requirements necessary for those types of development, it is something that's conditionally allowed in the zone. And remember, conditionally is a maybe with, compatibility requirements. So one of the things that they might, were they planners, and again, I hope I'm not getting too far ahead of them, they might be asking you to consider taking off the list of allowed uses, multifamily residence as a conditional use, recognizing that under Peter's comments that sewer may come of it. There may be a point at which sewer might be more welcome. Of course, I've heard the significant concerns this evening. There may be a time in the future where just the preservation of the existing single family residences may depend on a sewer. And at such time that comes, you might see some relatively intense high density development. And so I think something that I think that's a reasonable place if the Planning Commission was looking to be responsive to that would be the consideration of removing that from the list of allowed uses, that and potentially duplex. There are effects of that, of course. We have a housing shortage in the county. These types of housing can tend to be, more available to certain, people who are lower income or don't, have existing property that they can then use to leapfrog into, these Tumalo properties. So there are other effects of it, but that's, I think, the lever that you can relatively directly pull.
That answers my question. Just sort of like to the extent, and we guys got to not get into deliberations or expressing our views or anything, but if people on the Planning Commission were sympathetic to some of the testimony we've heard today and in the written record, then you're saying that's one thing the Planning Commission could recommend to the board. And of course, just so you guys know, the Board of County Commissioners who we've elected as a county will be making the decision about what to do with this plan. It's just our role to really listen, really delve into it on a deep level and then say what we think.
Can I offer one other?
Please
supplement Will's comment. The other, and the Planning Commission may decide to leave the written record open for a period of time. So if staff, myself included, have offered remarks that generate interest or perspective or different viewpoints, you would certainly be welcome to clarify your remarks or offer some additional feedback in terms of how we are offering deliberately constructive feedback, but there may be differences of opinion of some of these concepts. Another concept that the Planning Commission could contemplate is it pertains to the potential of sewer at some point in the future. Sewer is going to take a long time to the extent that there's support for it. If there's support for it, you got to plan for it. You got to figure out your infrastructure needs. You've got to design it, you got to figure out how to operate and maintain it. It's not something in our experience, and I think the Terrebonne sewer feasibility study is another kind of data point there. They're not close to building that system yet. So in light of all the various factors that go into creating a sewer system, a district, a staff, the ability to design it, the ability to implement it, the ability to operate and maintain it, it's going to take time. One thing that could be considered is a policy that says at such time that, I'll say this imperfectly, but something to the extent of at such time that Tumalo establishes a sewer district or a sanitary authority, reconvene or revisiting the Tumalo community plan will be something like be imperative, or at such time that a sewer district or sanitary authority is established, revisit with the community the Tumalo community plan to determine if updates are necessary, something like that. Because then again, I don't know if this will ever happen, but if it does, for reasons that have been articulated by the residents today about what the implications are, what they see and what they value of that community, it could change. And in ways that Will described, he's given you examples. You could get density, you could get bigger businesses. The community deserves, and under this concept, the ability to re-engage about what this circumstance of a sanitary district or a sewer authority, what this represents, and the importance of engaging the community so they have a voice in how this infrastructure what it means to have this infrastructure in place potentially, and how it will how it can be integrated in the community way. Here's the planner talk, in a win-win situation. So I offer that type of policy framework to the audience here. You may hate it, and if the written record's left open, you could certainly express your opinions about that. But it's another way of, we have the status quo today in many respects, but there's certainly a recognition that things can and sometimes do change in the future, and how can you plan for it accordingly. So those are some thoughts as well.
Thank you. I like that you guys are giving us some options so that whenever we do get into deliberations, we have some, hopefully you guys are taking notes and you can think about, what you may want to recommend or move to recommend. So yes, the hearing is still open. We haven't closed any records or anything. So if people are itching to kind of contribute and you haven't contributed yet, then please fill out a blue sheet. But I'm going to go to Commissioner Cyrus's question first, and then we'll go to people who want to speak.
Yeah, I guess partly to second what Peter was saying, what we heard tonight was a lot of very general, I heard a general attitude that we'd like to kind of keep Tumalo the way it is, and people like what they have. But if everyone would actually take a look at the specifics of the plan and give us some very specific recommendations and suggestions that would be helpful to us. It's hard to incorporate something in the plan. It just says we like it the way it is. So if you could help us out in that respect, I would appreciate it at least.
That's a great comment, Matt. Yeah.
I think very specific.
Yes, yours were, yep.
Did they get to you?
Yep, absolutely. And by the way, how the just so you guys kind of know the process or what's going on with the comments. So they're all getting uploaded to the website, which you also can look at. But what's cool about that is it means as soon as they're uploaded, we have access to them immediately. We don't have to wait for anyone to email them to us or anything like that. So it's like we can just log on there or not even log on. We just click on the thing anytime and see if there's been any new comments added. So it's really good. Yes. Sorry.
Website. As of yesterday, it didn't include the complete draft plan. So the draft plan isn't linked. It gives you different colored matrices and all other kinds of stuff that I guess you're supposed to piece together. But it didn't actually give you what you're asking us to comment on.
So, hang on a sec. So first of all, we're still in orderly hearing mode. So that means, you gotta see if I can incorporate your comment or question in order. So we did Matt's, we're gonna do Robert Fish, and then other people can go, to comment one by one. And
Just
so.
come up again. My name's Nunzi.
So we're gonna go after Robert Fish. Yeah, so and it's okay. It's all right, everyone. But we're just gonna go in order, and the only reason for that is just because otherwise everyone will start talking at once and then we won't have an orderly hearing anymore. So let's do that. Let's hear from Robert Fish, then we'll hear from Nunzi Gold. Then we'll probably have a staff response.
Okay, my name is Robert Fish. I live down in Tumalo on Second Street. We've lived there on the property since 1972. Just a little bit of background there. During the sewer feasibility study that was put out a year or so ago that got started and worked through, it created a lot of engagement with the community on the idea of a sewer system. And with that, there's been a group that's looking into the actual sewer system for Tumalo, because the original feasibility was really simple. It didn't get into depth at all. It just said, yep, Tumalo's time for a sewer down there. So the actual formation of a sewer district is moving forward at this point. It's really slow, really small. We're right at the very, very, very beginning portion of it. We're starting to put together what I call a steering committee that is just trying to figure out what a sewer district would even look like down there. So it is on the horizon. It is being thought about and considered. We haven't engaged public at all, but it's not way out there years before it's going to come. But it is in the process of being established at this point.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Okay, let's go to Nunzi Gold.
Okay, so I'm wondering if you, Chair, could pull up the county's website on this topic so we could see it on the screen.
So I don't have a computer in front of me. I have.
Okay,
a screen,
perhaps
but
staff could pull that up and show it on the screen so that you can see what the public can see. And I really encourage
I think
you.
we actually do see the same thing that the public can see. We don't have a special login or any kind of
Okay.
special.
Well, this document is not in its entirety on the screen.
Okay, so
So if you look at the blue and green charts that Peter has in front of him, those are there, but it's not this plan.
So,
It's not this 36-page plan. So we need to get that up there so people know what they're commenting on.
okay, so for the record, I think what I understand is you're not able to find the plan in its entirety
I
available.
can find the plan if I go to your August 10th meeting and click on the agenda packet item. But if I go to the county's website on the whole project, this little baby here that you're taking public comment on isn't there.
Okay, got it. Okay, so
So you're asking people to use bits and pieces to piece together a plan. They can't read the whole plan to even understand where parts get fit in.
So-
That's problematic for public
let me
comment.
summarize because I think I understand what you're saying.
And I really encourage your commission to look at what the public has access to.
Yeah.
Because
so-
if you're getting fed other stuff, you're not understanding that people in the community who are trying to communicate to you may not be even knowing what you're talking about or what you're wanting comment on.
Okay, so I think I understand what you're saying. I think you were able to find the plan because you're able to navigate through. but you're
No,
suggesting.
I was able
Let me
to have enough land use
Ms. Gold, let me
experience to
finish.
go back to the public meeting portal, click on past meetings,
Okay,
find the meeting,
let me finish.
find out that it was continued, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Most people in your audience, including, I suspect, commissioners on this panel, don't know how to do that.
Okay, so I think your suggestion that we upload it or the staff upload it to the website directly on the project page, if it's not already there, I think that's an important suggestion.
Already there.
Okay, so I appreciate you bringing this up. I don't think there's anything further to talk about with this, and I really don't want to distract from the rest of the issues that people are bringing up that are substantive. Let's move on. Yes, Lauren Kramer.
Okay, I put in a blue card and I just had a solution, a suggestion
Yeah.
in the plan. So I am a Tumalo resident. I am not within the area that we've been talking about, but we do drive by it. And I was going to dinner last night and we were talking about how it's going to be really congested at that intersection there. And so when I just heard about maybe possibly putting a moratorium on duplexes and multi-housing right there in that section, I think it's a great idea because it would be less cars, especially if there was an evacuation needed. If there was a wildfire, you got to think about those kinds of things. You know, that intersection, it doesn't really hold that many cars. So if we had to evacuate and there was multi-housing with duplexes and such, that's a concern. So I just thought I'd add that in.
Kind of a vote in favor of the limit on.
I vote in favor of
okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, other comments that, yes, come on up.
Tanya Hanlon, resident, Tumalo. A gentleman who was just speaking was making reference to the initiation of a sewer
Your
district.
district, yep.
How would that work? Could you have 3 different parties initiating a district on their own? And then who becomes the district? How does that process? Because this gentleman was referring to, there's a handful of people. So let me just be very simple and clear. If a group of downtown business owners were to establish a district, their agenda and their goals are very, very much in opposition currently to what the rest of the rural community would like to do. So how does a district become the district? Would it be, I'm asking, is it what's the answer to that?
Great question. So let's save that one for staff and let's see if there's any other comments. And then we're going to go back to our staff response section. I still have more questions for you guys. So any other comments? Oh, and Commissioner Altman has a question. I think you have your, and if you're on Zoom listening and you'd like to say something, then raise your Zoom hand. Commissioner Altman.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to address what Nunzi said. I'm on the Tumalo Community Plan Update landing page, and I don't actually see the 2020 to 2040 plan. The 2010 to 2030 plan is there. The 2020 to 2040 goals and policies and also goals and policies summary table are both there. But as far as the full plan, I don't see it. So I just wanted to let whoever know is in charge of updating that perhaps they could recheck and make sure that it's up there for everybody to view.
So even for Peter and Tarek, even if it is there somewhere, it seems that it's hard to find. So maybe make it super obvious where, because we got at least two people having a hard time locating it. So thank you very much.
Keep in mind, we're bound by our IT department. So we have certain boxes we have to work within, but we'll see what we can do to perhaps make it a little more easier if people are having troubles of either finding it on the Planning Commission agenda or the Tumalo Community Plan website itself.
Yeah, I think that the point is well taken, that if we're asking for specific recommendations about the plan language, that we do want to make it as accessible as possible. But I also hear what you're saying about like, yeah, there's only so much you can do, of course, but yeah, you guys are smart and creative, and if there's anything you can come up with.
And just to be clear, there, if you go under land use hearings, so you have a Tumalo Community Plan page, and then there's, which gives you an overview of the plan, there's a story map, and then there's actually a button for land use hearings, and then there's a button for planning commission hearings, and then there's two links to the one for the TSP and one for the Tumalo Community Plan. So if you go to the Tumalo Community Plan update, you'll, as I see it, seems that you can, there's a direct link to it. So as Peter noted, we will do what we can with our IT. We are limited, but certainly we could have a cross-reference there, but I don't want the public to think that we are somehow deliberately hiding the Tumalo Community Plan. So there's, we certainly strive to provide as much information as possible. Sounds like, we can have a link or two, but it is on our website. I can see it right here in front of me under land use hearings, which I get it, could be counterintuitive if you're just doing a search for Tumalo Community Plan.
Okay, let's move on from that. Peter, can you go back to, I have more questions for you clarifying things, but I think I think you were actually in the middle of something that you were saying when I asked my question, Matt asked his question, and we got started on some other things. So
distracted.
yes, and it was all good stuff, so no problem. But I did want to give you an opportunity to continue what you were saying.
So one clarification is the Tumalo Community Plan is an appendix to the comprehensive plan, not the transportation system plan. The other thing is that we talked about the state land use system. In terms of the roundabout art, typically this is a policy document, and the Planning Commission doesn't have ties to the purse string, as I understand it. The road department is working with the various groups, the direction of our Board of County Commissioners, and so what they're looking for, and the road department is waiting for, is one unified group proposal to come out of Tumalo, whatever Tumalo wants, and then the board will work as a signatory on the permit to put whatever the roundabout art is. Now, you could do in the Tumalo Community Plan, if you want to have a policy, you could have a policy about, encourage aesthetics in appropriate intersections or roundabouts or something like that. It's a policy document, so then you'd have policy that supported that. And we've talked about a roundabout at Tumalo Road and Klein Falls as well. So it's not just the ODOT roundabout that's in there with a plan. So there's that, but basically the Planning Commission, you don't have any financial authority, but you can have a policy that encourages that. And then the person could cite to that policy when the group goes to the Board of County Commissioners seeking some sort of funding, possibly in the permit.
So a note on the aesthetic stuff before we move on. Peter has a comment, and then I also have a question about that. Maybe we'll just keep all the aesthetic stuff together, if that's okay.
We'll be artful.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, Madam
Please.
Chair, I was Peter's correct, that it's a policy document. The Planning Commission, the Community Development Department doesn't have purse strings for art, but I would have you reach out to Laura Skundrick or to Stephanie Robinson. They work in administration, and there are certain funds that one may be able to apply for, that if there's consensus around art, I would reach out to one or both of them with your compelling grassroots organization and see if there's opportunities you would be applying for essentially maybe a county grant, county funding under certain categories. But that's where I would start. So you can, if you want to reach out to me tomorrow, I can give you their specific contact information, but that would be something to supplement. I still think it's a great idea to have a policy that potentially that supports the importance of aesthetic investments or something like that in the Tumalo community.
Okay, and then My question about that is the other groups that you mentioned that maybe are already involved, are they local groups? Are they groups from other places in Oregon? Like, who are these groups? Are Lauren's group one of them, or?
Lauren probably knows more than I know. There was one other.
There's one group that came up with a concept, and there was others that wanted to actually do the same thing. So I kind of put everyone together, and that's where we come for.
Okay, great. So you're involved with that. Okay.
Here, I might.
Thank you.
You could just have her come up to the mic and repeat that,
Okay. Yep.
because when you look at the recordings on
Yep.
these.
Thank
asked
you.
something, and then it's kind of like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah, thank you so much for that reminder. Yeah, please just repeat what you said for people listening or people watching the video.
So originally there was one group that came up with a concept, and then there was others that wanted to submit a concept as well. So I put everyone together, and I've been working with all four. So that's everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. Continue with your response.
Do you have anything you want to say? I don't want to hog the mic here,
No,
but
you're doing great.
the only thing I was going to say about sewer districts, and I'm a transportation planner, so take this with an entire shaker of salt, but it's a public process. So basically, whatever entity wants to perform having a sewer district, you've got to get a petition, you've got to have boundaries, you have an election of the people that are in that, whether it rises or falls. So there's a whole public process that would be led by the community and not the county, which is similar to what Terrebonne went through. So there is a public process to have a sewer district form in Tumalo. I'm not part of it. I don't know that much about it. You now know everything I know about the process, but there is state statutes and OARs about how these sort of utility districts are proposed, formed, and voted on.
So Commissioner Kelly?
Yeah, I do have a question about that, and since we are like an unincorporated area, how do you perform like voting districts? And I was kind of curious about that in response to like the sewer district potential, as well as Mr. Dunn, who just stepped out, also mentioned, his question about like an architectural review. How in a community where we don't, vote as a community, how does that happen? What's the
So
process
for
of
the
that?
sewer district, they work with the county clerk's office to see who are the registered voters in the area. For an architectural review board, and this is me, kind of spitting in the wind. Typically the planning commission, like the dog control board, things like that, the board puts out, much like we did with the planning commission, they put out applications for, a certain entity, and then people apply, the board interviews them, county administrator gets involved, and that's how you would do that. So the board would have to, the community could come to the board with a proposal for an architectural review board, however they wanted to structure it, and then the board could probably take it and run from there. I don't know how it would fit in with land use. I know that that's always kind of a challenge. With Sisters, it's a little easier because their architectural review board is based on a time standard. It had to be a piece of architecture that was found, and they have timelines. It has to be between this time and this time in Oregon to fit the Western theme. Small town theme. I've been around a review board once trying to describe what you're looking for, and it's quite the challenge. But not to say it couldn't be done, but that would kind of, come organically from the community, what you think a small town should be. Are there sub-districts for the residential areas versus, or is it just the downtown? And then you'd go to the board with that proposal.
May I supplement?
Please.
On both?
Please do, yeah.
I'll start with Commissioner Kelly's. There's a lot, it's pretty rare for a county to have a design review process. Cities will have design review processes. But what could happen if you wanted to think how to get out of the governmental realm of it, is you could explore funding, but the community could get behind some architectural guidelines. You do a charrette, you'd hire an architect, you would promote it, and you'd get everybody to talk about what are the Tumalo designs that we want to promote. And it could be a lot, it could be little, it could be narrowed, and they would be guidelines. And so presumably the community would get behind, the guidelines, and then you'd hire, an architect would draft them up, and because they're guidelines and not regulations, the community would essentially be encouraging new development to match the guidelines. So that's a way of approaching it without setting up a regulatory system where, prior to submitting any kind of formal building permit, you've got to get some kind of design review that meets a motif or a certain standard. And so I felt compelled just to acknowledge that there's a guideline process, and some communities use them again as a voluntary tool that says, hey, the community's behind these kinds of designs. And for all intents and purposes, we strongly encourage new development to consider incorporating, all or a part of these design options. Come back to the sewer district piece. Just for a little bit more context, someone would, you would do the homework and you would have an understanding. This is my perspective, a little bit more than the salt shaker analogy that Peter offered, but there would be an understanding of what a sewer system might look like within a specific boundary. That boundary would be identified, and as Peter noted, it would go to the county clerk, and advocates for that effort would go to property owners, to registered voters in that area to see if they would sign basically a petition for a sanitary authority or sewer district. And if you get a super majority, like I don't remember the exact percentage, but if it's overwhelming, the matter is referred to the board and it's a formality. Like the board has the option to conduct a public hearing, but they could be based on the overwhelming support under this one scenario. They could just recognize that boundary, and it doesn't have to go to a vote, as I understand it. Now in Terrebonne, they didn't meet that threshold. And so it went to a vote. And if you remember the papers, I want to say in the spring, it was like razor thin, and they had to wait until some of the absentee ballots came back, and lo and behold, it passed by like a margin that's, you could count on two hands. So it does get a little complicated, but there are those processes that I've outlined. And if you want more information, you could reach out to the county clerk, talk to Steve Dennison. You could also reach out to some of the representatives of the Terrebonne sewer effort. Linda Swearingen's a consultant, and they could offer or articulate their experience because it's happening in real time.
I have a follow-up question on the Architectural Review Committee. I thought that was an intriguing suggestion also, and I was just wondering if it came up during any of the community plan meetings, and if so, what were the general, if it came up, then what were the variety of opinions that you heard about such a thing?
I don't recall an architectural review ever coming up at the open houses. Mr. Dunn commented, certainly a fine idea. You can put a policy in there, but that it didn't come up any of the open houses that I was at, the tables I was at. Do you have any?
I heard it maybe kind of anecdotally and more around like a HOA model around like a private group of neighborhood group kind of forming for that, but yeah, nothing really made it into any policy recommendation or goal.
Okay, just want to make sure there wasn't like a whole bunch of opposition to it and that we didn't hear, but it sounds like there wasn't like, like 25 people saying, no way, we would hate that idea. Okay, just checking. Okay. Other questions or comments or anything? Okay. Gosh, is there anything on Zoom? Are there any Zoom hands raised? Okay. Well, in that case, I guess we'll move on to our decision making time. So our options are hold the oral and written record open and continue the hearing to a date certain, close the oral record and hold the written record open to a date certain, close both the oral and written record and set a date certain for deliberations, or finally close both the oral and written record and begin deliberations right now.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Cyrus?
I move to close the oral record, or close the hearing, excuse me, and hold the written record open for 2 weeks from today, closing at 4 p.m.
4 p.m. on which date? 2 weeks.
September 7th.
September 7th, that is.
Mhm.
See here.
And then we
Exactly
can,
2 weeks. Yep.
and then we'll deliberate at a future date as it fits the calendar.
Okay,
I would second the motion.
so it's been moved and seconded to close the oral record and hold the written record open to a date certain, being September 7th, 4 PM. Is there any debate on the motion or things you'd like to share about why you made the motion?
No, it just seemed like a reasonable time frame to allow additional comments to come in, and then we can move on.
Other comments or debate about the motion? Commissioner Altman, you got anything? Okay. Yeah, I'll just acknowledge that we had one request to leave the written record open from a member of the public, and then also Peter Gutowski pointing out that if we were to leave the written record open, then, you know, if people think of other, as Commissioner Cyrus suggested, if people think of other specific policy things that we could incorporate into the plan that may help you with your desire to limit growth, then those could be easily submitted into the record through written comment. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote. Commissioner Cyrus, how do you vote?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
I'll also vote yes, so, or aye. So 5 in favor, 0 opposed. It's unanimous. The motion is passed to close the oral record and hold the written record open until or through September 7th at 4 PM. Okay. Yes, a question?
I think if I could make a suggestion, and it's tagged onto Commissioner Cyrus, is that what would be very helpful for us and specifically me was, and as I read these, the document, and hopefully you can find it, it's the first document on the landing page. If you can find and read and say specific things and change. I understand the general themes and ideas that we all have. Super clear, but it would be really helpful if specific comments could be made on specific items. It just would be really helpful for us to then be able to make our advice to the board.
Yeah, that is actually really helpful because just in terms of our process, what will happen when we start deliberating, whenever we don't know when that will be yet, but we'll be determining that. Someone will start with a motion to either recommend the plan as it is, or they could say, we recommend the plan, but we would like to change these 3 parts of it. We don't like these 3 parts. And then we'll all be discussing that and then taking a vote. So the person making that motion, it's important for them to understand, hey, they have to be so specific. Like, I recommend the plan minus these 3 things. So they want to know, like, what do you want us to change about the plan when we recommend it to the Board of County Commissioners?
And I might add that, you know, on other topics, we've gone through line by line, we've gone through topic by topic, and we've gone through specific, and often the staff will give us, you know, choice A, B, C as far as recommendations, and we'll go through and identify, you know, based on comments, the direction that we want to take, and then we'll, you know, submit the whole package then to the Board of Commissioners as a recommendation. So, I mean, if you've got on, you know, page 14, there's certain lines that everybody is, you know, thinks needs to come out or whatever, we need to hear about those as opposed to just a general comment that, yeah, we want to keep it the same, which, I mean, that's easy. We can just say, hey, we just support the plan as proposed because we think it does what we need, but we don't know the specifics.
Okay. Commissioner Williams?
And I do take your input very seriously. I have 6 pages of what was said tonight, so I do write down what you say and I do read it. And then the written comments, I will read every single comment. Like the mule deer, I read over 500 comments and I kept a tally. So what you folks say does make a difference.
Thank you for saying that. That's really important. Yeah. Okay. So, great. So now we will go to our next item, Planning Commission and staff comments. Who wants to go first? Well, you're,
It's me, Will Groves, your planning manager. I wanted to let you know we had received in the comprehensive plan update, we'd received a detailed comment letter from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. And we were planning on incorporating that into the draft so that the next time you or the public see it, you'll see those with those Warm Springs recommendations in there. We'll also email you a kind of a red line strikeout of that so you can see what those changes were like. To the extent you have concerns or additions or edits to that, you would bring that forward to us as you came to deliberations. But they're an important governmental partner. We wanted to make sure we definitely were responsive to those comments. The other thing I want to bring to your attention has to do with fire mapping. So, of course, the Oregon Department of Forestry, together with Oregon State University, had worked to build a wildfire hazard map, a wildfire risk map for the entirety of Oregon. That map was rolled out. There were some significant public concerns with it, and it was withdrawn with the notion that it would be revised and that there would be more public participation and outreach. And so we've received word that on September 21st at the Oregon Association of Counties meeting, the maps will be rolled out for government agencies. So emergency managers, county commissioners, for a preview and initial comments. We're anticipating that those maps would be received by the commissioners probably 2 weeks roughly prior to that event. And then the commissioners would provide some initial comment. And then there would be some opportunities for feedback before it would go out to a general public rollout where there would be public meetings and other presentations. But just wanted to give you a heads up that, that's something that, was a significant effort that was undertaken, withdrawn, and is now in the process of getting ready to move forward again. And we'll definitely keep you apprised of how that's moving along. But as of this date, we haven't seen the maps, anticipating seeing them in the next few weeks.
And then the public will have a chance after the leaders have seen it.
Definitely. I think there's an effort to make sure that, kind of give a first check before to see if it's in the ballpark before starting a large public engagement.
okay. Other comments? Peter?
Just two things, just to remind the planning commission. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but the petition for incorporation of Mountain Views, that hearing scheduled for September 20th. The staff report will be available 1 week prior. So we're continuing to evaluate the proposal and receive feedback from various agencies. So what we'll do as a courtesy, once that staff report is posted online, we will forward you a copy of that, just because you might have an interest. It certainly has land use implications and regional coordination issues. So stay tuned for that one. So that'll get posted either on the 13th or the 14th of September. Also, just the last thing I was going to just put on your radar. I know that we've talked about it in the past. It's House Bill 3197. This is a law that was put into effect, was signed into law by Governor Kotek in June. It pertains to the requirement of establishing clear and objective standards and procedures for rural housing in 3 locations: in unincorporated communities like Tumalo, in exception lands, rural residential 10, for example, and then on lands that have been successfully rezoned from exclusive farm use to rural residential 10 or multiple use agricultural 10. And this law comes into effect on July 1st of 2025. And Will, I think in the past, as I recall, I know we've told the board this, but we've applied for grants to help us update the codes to meet this clear and objective standard for housing. The purpose of reiterating this or reminding you of this forthcoming responsibility is the board on Wednesday had our lobbyist Doug Riggs on I was actually on Monday, and we talked about House Bill 3197 and whether or not there might be interest in revisiting the law to lessen the impacts as it pertains to Deschutes County in particularly. This law, if it stays in effect, will consume a significant portion of your long-range planning staff. The Board of County Commissioners has yet to prioritize it, given a lot of the projects that are currently before you. There's others that the board has prioritized pertaining to allowing recreational vehicles to be sited on certain properties under certain development standards. But this is a topic that we're going to continue to be discussing with you. And as it becomes elevated as a priority, I can foresee Will unveiling with you and the board a multi-phased, multi-year approach to how to update our codes to meet this new requirement. And for background, this was a law that was established through the courts that found that in 2017, this responsibility to have needed housing, clear and objective needed housing, which was assumed to be applicable in just to urban growth boundaries. The courts found that nope, it applied to all housing. And the reason why the legislation was adopted in the way that it was this legislative session is without it, it would have applied to all housing, including on farm and forest land. So there was a significant effort to try to scale it back to those three areas that I talked about. But nonetheless, for Deschutes County, that has Goal 5 inventories, that has floodplains in a lot of exception lands, in addition to having Tumalo and Terrebonne as rural unincorporated communities, Sun River, it's, and our subdivision codes, it's a big lift. Not that we're at all expressing any disagreement with the importance of having clear and objective standards for housing. We have a housing crisis. There's a lot of reasons for why we need to be simplifying our codes to ensure that housing is, from a zoning standpoint, is as streamlined as possible. So this long-winded overview is just to kind of keep it on your radar. We'll see if there's consensus in the short session to see how House Bill 3197 as codified in ORS 197 might get a little narrowed. But regardless, I see it being a responsibility of the planning division. And just given the numerous zones that we have and various chapters in our procedural code, it could be something that engages the planning commission, like I said, in a multi-phase, multi-year project. We're starting with what we would conceive to be the low-hanging fruit, what could be done relatively easily, and then work our way to some of the more difficult sections of our code, but for example, that pertain to the wildlife area combining zone, or that pertain to our floodplain zone. So that's House Bill 3197. Yeah.
You have a specific on how, like, what type of change we would be looking at as far as what current versus what we'd be going to?
Do you want to?
Yeah, so we ran into this a little bit with the wildlife update. We were trying to get that when it came through the planning commission, trying to make sure that it was ready for a clear and objective standard. There's ups and downs to it. Again, I want to reiterate that we as planners are in favor of this broadly, that we think that there is a housing crisis, and to the extent that we're describing some of the difficulties or complexities of it, it's very clear. I want to be very clear that we're not opponents to that process. So, for example, when a planning receives an application of a subdivision, let's say you have 100 acres, you want to make 10 10-acre lots out of it. One of the things that's in the code right now is that the subdivision has to be found by the decision maker, that it results in the orderly development in the area.
Which is objective rather than subjective.
Which is subjective because it's subject to discretion. So
Yeah,
different people could reasonably come to the conclusion. And so in order to make that objective, there's two things you have to do. First, if you want to make it objective, you basically have to explain what orderly development is. And that would probably be that, you would have will serve letters from all the utilities, that, connections to neighboring streets would be appropriate, that the fire access, you just really have to spell everything out. The upside of that is that a developer has a really clear notion of what's expected of them. The downside is that it takes discretion out of the decision maker's hands. And so, there may be a situation where it doesn't make sense to have, a 20-foot wide paved road because nobody's going to use it in practice, or the fire department doesn't need that type of access. They already, the roads that exist are sufficient. The saving kind of grace of that is that these clear and objective standards can be then followed by subjective standards. So once you've put a clear and objective standard on the menu, as it were, you can also have a subjective standard as an alternative, so the developer gets to choose. So they can either with certainty say, look, if I meet these very clear check the box items, I will walk out with a permit. Or in the alternative, if I want to basically talk to the decision makers and go through a process to say, I'd like something else for reasons, that still remains available. But the upshot is that one, you have to build a clear and objective standard that captures all the permutations of what orderly development might capture. If you don't build the clear and objective standards well, nobody's going to use it. And then you're also now maintaining two versions of code, right? You've got a clear and objective version as well as a subjective, and you're trying to keep them in sync. Jurisdictions. So this came first for certain properties within the urban growth boundaries, and jurisdictions have struggled to bring these into place. For example, the City of Bend subdivision code says that a sewer line needs to be close to certain other facilities, and they were taken to court because what's close mean? And the interesting effect is under the law, if the standard is not clear and objective, it's stricken. So you could say, we want to make sure that the fire department, you might have a rule that says, we want to make sure that the fire department is cool with this. And if you say that's not clear and objective and you strike it out, there are now no fire requirements. So it has a pretty drastic effect if you don't put in this two phase clear and objective, and then typically a backing subjective standard.
So I'd assume the ultimate goal is that there would be far fewer appeals based on subjective standards, where you can just check the box on the objective one. In fact, a computer could approve the application almost.
That's the hope.
In Washington County, mired in litigation, it's easier said than done to create clear and objective standards and how it interfaces with different codes. And so it gives us pause just knowing that we're a sophisticated county as well, with a lot of different codes and overlay zones and whatnot. So anyway, more to come. This will be a topic. And I wouldn't be surprised if the county starts, well, we'll have a conversation with the board once we start clearing out some of these big projects, the comprehensive plan update, the transportation system plan, the Tumalo community plan, rural accessory dwelling units, Senate Bill 1013 pertaining to RVs as a secondary unit. Once we move that through the legislative amendment process and capacity emerges, we'll be checking in with the board again. It likely the timing will be perfect. Have we received any grant funding from the state to help us with this responsibility? That might be likely, in which case it kind of comes together. So we'll be talking about House Bill 3197, all these facets. I think as we get farther along in this calendar year and into next calendar year. The last thing, if I may, is just to remind the Planning Commission we have a retreat coming on September 14th. I'll send it a packet. It'll have maps. It'll have materials. It'll have discussion items for our retreat, but the thought is we would meet, spoiler alert, meet here at CDD at 2:00. Hang out together for approximately 5 hours, seeing a couple of different sites that I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and then have a retreat at the Bend Airport just to talk about, how we're collaborating with one another, what your expectations are, kind of what our experiences have been, what's on the horizon, like HB 3197. So we're really looking forward to it. Long range planning staff will be joining us, and we'll have several cars with us. Of course, you're always welcome to drive your own car, but we thought we would just kind of carpool from here. And it's been a while since we've had the retreat. We're really looking forward to kind of getting out of this kind of dais to table structure and just kind of, being together in cars and at these field trips, and then being at a somewhat informal retreat-like setting just to kind of get to know each other better, especially with our two newer planning commissioners. So
you're buying, huh?
we'll have dinner. We'll have dinner catered. So yeah, we'll definitely make sure there are refreshments and you're fed appropriately.
Do we have a good sense of like who all can make it to that meeting? 2 to 7-ish.
I wouldn't miss a party.
I'm not missing it either. Yeah.
Put it on my calendar.
Okay,
That's
good.
why I was-
Okay, good. So Susan, are you coming? Do you know yet? Okay, good. Yeah, so we got plenty of people. That's great. And hopefully we'll have our other 2 guys as well. But yeah, we'll see what they say.
I had
That's
already,
good.
emailed Tanya to see when it would start so that I could take some work in the morning.
Perfect. That's what I did too. Yeah. I'm putting all the afternoon people earlier and yeah. Okay, cool. All right, commissioner comments? Or anything else, Peter?
Sure. I just wanted to thank everybody for a hearing I thought went well. It was finally got a little more input, and hopefully we'll get some more and get some direction, because on a topic that quite frankly I know very little about. So looking forward to seeing what we get.
Great. I'll come back to myself. Commissioner Altman. Okay, Commissioner Kelly.
I thought you did a great job encouraging
thanks.
Extra participation because, I've been on that side of it and I know it is intimidating.
Right.
So I think you did a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel the same way. Like you're like, even when I went to the board meeting one time, it's like, oh, like even being used to being sitting here, just being over there, you're like, when do I talk? Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Williams.
So I reiterate all of that, but I don't know if anyone has been to wildfire.oregon.gov. It's a very cool site where you can see where all the wildfires are. You can get detailed. I was like blown away that we have a fire on the northwest coast of Oregon. So it's very cool and interactive. So you can tell folks, so it's this, because a girlfriend of mine used to live in Oak Ridge. I'm like, yeah, no, that fire's not near there. We had one, last year. So a very cool website.
Cool. So I'm just going to ask for some input real quick on, this is well in advance of the item, but when we get to the transportation system plan, deliberations, in the past, we've had a little bit of discussion about whether we should start deliberations with a motion, or we should ask our staff to put together a matrix for us and just kind of discuss the matrix informally and then have a motion. Just looking for some input of, does anyone feel strongly one way or the other about how we go about that? Because what I'm probably going to end up talking with the staff ahead of time and then checking in, and
I prefer the matrix.
do the matrix
I
first,
really do.
kind of go through together and then have a motion.
Yeah.
Okay. And like with the wildlife one, we had like kind of several different levels of decision making. Like, do you want this at all? And did you find that helpful, or should we
I
do something
did.
similar kind of?
I did. I have a feeling it probably won't be as in-depth as the mule deer was, but yes, like this is what it is, all the way down, and then these are like different alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Okay. Susan, do you have anything?
I agree. I like having a matrix, and we could always have it and not use it, but better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Great point. Yeah, but what do you think? Should we have like kind of a little kick the tires discussion before we have a motion, or should I strictly enforce there must be a motion on the floor first?
I don't mind having the sort of testing the waters first. That I think that's fine personally.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the main spirit of that rule is let's know what we're talking about before we really get into it with the debating. So maybe if I sense there's a debate sort of starting, then I'll ask for a motion. But otherwise, it just seems like it's been very helpful each time to kind of go through informally and just kind of say sort of where you're at on certain things. That way, the maker of the motion has a little bit more to go on, so we don't end up making motion after motion after motion that aren't quite right with like 50 trillion amendments to the motion.
The first deliberation I partook in, it was that way, and I just got confused and I couldn't keep anything straight. And It's just the matrix, I think, and I think you would appreciate it too. It's laid out a little more clear.
Like too awkward. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Just sounds good. I just wanted to get some input. Great. Well, thank you guys all for a really good experience this evening. And I think on that note, we can go ahead at 7:35. I'll adjourn the meeting.